Okay, we're back to Proclus's commentary on the Timaeus. Last time we looked at the divine allotments, which was interesting. And they work at many levels, basically in the same way that the division of nature is conducted. And this was to explain how Athens and Sais could both have the same patron deity. We will just keep going in the text. So this is the next quote. And I believe this is the priest speaking to Solon, narrated by Critias. Yours indeed, by a priority to ours of 1,000 years, receiving the seed of your race from Vulcan and the earth. Proclus, with respect to the fabrication of Vulcan, how may someone decide so as not perfectly to fail in his conceptions of the power of the god? Gonna move some windows around. Okay, there we go. How may someone decide so as not perfectly to fail in his conceptions of the power of the god? Okay, for the assertions of the multitude concerning him belong to things which must be entirely rejected. But that which is said by those whose notions are more intellectual is indeed true, but requires no small degree of confirmation. Okay. We shall therefore introduce to our discussion from theologists credibility concerning his divinity. That Vulcan, then, is of the demiurgic, but not of the vivific or connective or any other series, is manifested by theologists when they represent him as fashioning things from brass, employing the bellows, and in short, when they call him the artificer. Okay, so we have the vivific, connective, demiurgic series of gods. I haven't seen all of the series of gods spelled out. I wonder if this series is the same as Sarai, the idea that from one henad is suspended an intellect that is in the nature of that divinity, a soul that's in the nature of that divinity, all the way down to particular places that participate of the nature of that divinity. So one series stems from one henad and connects through all the orders. And in each series, there's going to be fewer members as you ascend. So starting with one henad, that'll proceed to, well, principally one intellect and principally one soul, but others will kind of be associated with the series as well, to a lesser degree, to a less perfect degree. All right, so Vulcan, Hephaestus is in the demiurgic series. Makes sense. But that he is the fabricator of sensible and not of psychical or intellectual works is also manifested by them. So a sensible demiurge. For the formation of a mirror, the exercise of the brazier's art, lameness, and everything of this kind are symbols of his productive energy about a sensible nature. Right. So it's mirrors indicate that he's dealing with a reflection of the true reality, not the authentic reality. Moreover, that he is the maker of all sensibles is evident from the same theologists, who say that he was hurled from Olympus as far as to the earth, and who make all the receptacles of the mundane gods to have been elaborated by Vulcan. Okay. Athena, her fabric, her veil, I think, we could refer to the previous session to get the precise term, but I think her veil is equated with the actual mundane cosmos. And I think it was said elsewhere that Vulcan, Hephaestus, and Athena cooperate as attendants to the demiurgic act at the level of the sensibles. So, receiving the seed of your race from Hephaestus and the earth. Okay, so there's that association between Athena and Hephaestus. And I think that has mythological grounds from the Iliad, but I would have to go and check on that. All right, let's read this sentence again. Moreover, that he is the maker of all sensibles is evident from the same theologists who say that he was hurled from Olympus as far as to the earth, and who make all the receptacles of the mundane gods to have been elaborated by Hephaestus. Okay, so all of the, I guess, Okema vehicles of the gods were elaborated by Hephaestus, so he made all sensibles, including even the vehicles of the gods. If, therefore, we admit that these things are true, this God will be the fabricator totally of every corporeal formed substance, preparing for the gods their visible seats, rendering all things subservient to the one harmony of the world, filling all fabrications with corporeal life, and adorning and connecting with forms the resisting and gross nature of matter. Okay. Rendering all things subservient to the one harmony of the world. Athena's veil maybe is closer to the idea of that harmony, more the reason principles of nature, and Hephaestus is more associated with the actual gross, well, not the gross matter itself, but the giving of life and bodily formed substance. Okay. On this account also, he is said by theologists to fashion things from brass, as being the artificer of resisting solids. And because the heavens are said to be brazen, as being an imitation of the intelligible, the maker of the heavens is likewise fabled to be a brazier. But he is lame in both his feet, as being the fabricator of things that are last in the progressions of beings. For such are bodies, and also as being no longer able to proceed into another order. Likewise, because he is the maker of the universe, which, as Timaeus says, is without legs. Oh yeah, true. Interesting. And he was hurled from on high to earth, as extending his fabrication through the whole of sensible essence. Yeah, so these attributes of the myth correspond to the place and function of Hephaestus in this Platonic cosmogony. Whether, therefore, there are said to be certain psychical productive principles in the universe, or whether there are spermatic principles, the cause of all these must be referred to this God. Okay, so the spermatikos logos, or the psychic, it was physical. So whether therefore there are said to be certain physical productive principles in the universe, or whether there are spermatic principles, the cause of all these must be referred to this God. So previously I said the veil of Athena was maybe more like the kind of reason principles of nature, but no, those are attributed here by Proclus to Hephaestus. So we should probably examine more closely some other time how the functions of the corporeal demiurgic act of Athena and Hephaestus are related. I'm sure it's complementary. But okay. Physical reason principles, the spermatikos logos caused by Hephaestus. For that which nature effects by verging to bodies, this God fashions divinely and exemptly, exciting nature and using her as an instrument to her own fabrication. For innate heat is Hephaestian, being generated by Hephaestus as subservient to corporeal production. The productive cause, therefore, of generated natures is referred, in what Plato says, to this God. So it's not simply that the Athenians spring from Hephaestus, but all corporeal natures do. And there's something obscure, I think, here. For innate heat is Hephaestian. And then he said he excites nature as an instrument in her own fabrication, and he creates the spermatic principles of nature. Well, the Logos was associated with fire by Heraclitus, and by the Stoics, fire held the Logos as well. essentially, or was like the representative of the Logos among corporeals. And so the reason principles, I guess, are associated with the fiery nature. So innate heat is Hephaestian and is subservient to corporeal production, is for the purpose of corporeal production. So the spermaticos logos are maybe associated with fire, which I haven't seen before, but perhaps, and created by Hephaestus. Since, however, matter is necessary to things that are generated, for the gods in the heavens borrow parts from the universe as things which will be again returned for the generation of mortal animals. This also Plato delivers to us in a very admirable manner through earth. Okay? So it's not just the divine formal principle, but the material principle, earth here. The gods borrow parts from the universe as things which will be returned for the generation of mortal animals. Okay, so earth accomplishes this. For in seed itself there are productive powers and a subject, and the former are derived from the art of Hephaestus, but the latter from earth. So the spermaticos logos, like the seed, there is the productive powers, but also the substrate or subject. And so earth provides that subject, like matter, as the substrate. For by earth we must now understand every material cause, not that the Athenians sprung from the earth, but because it is usual to call all generation earth, and everything material earthly. Fire, therefore, is a Hephaestian instrument, but earth is matter, which is excited and vivified through fire, since it is of itself lifeless. Hence also, in consequence of this being filled, the material order is now assumed in conjunction with Hephaestus. Okay. And on this account, it is said that the seed of Hephaestus, together with earth, gave subsistence to the generation of the Athenians. For according to the fable also, Hephaestus, being in love with Athena, emitted his seed on the earth, and from thence the race of the Athenians blossomed forth. In short, therefore, Hephaestus is always in love with Athena, imitating her intellectual nature in the fabrication of sensibles. But Athenian or Minerval souls in the train of Athena, according to this energy of Hephaestus, especially receive vehicles from him, and are introduced into bodies from the productive powers of Hephaestus and the hypostasis of earth, the productive powers receiving Minerval impressions. For this god, prior to nature, is the perfecter of bodies, inserting in different bodies different symbols of the divinities. Okay. So those in the train of Athena will especially receive vehicles, I suppose mundane vehicles, or maybe even the Okema itself. Okay. I guess the implication would be those in the train of Athena have especially well-produced bodies. For this god, prior to nature, is the perfecter of bodies, inserting in different bodies different symbols of the divinities. Moving on. What, however, are the 1,000 years, according to which the Athenians are prior to the inhabitants of Sais? This, therefore, may be said historically, but it seems also to signify the temporal priority of the life of the Athenians, and, in short, that it is necessary their life should be more elevated than that of the Phaeacians. For as in the invisible orders of things, many genera are suspended from the same leader, some indeed more proximately, but others more subordinately, after the same manner also of Minerval souls, descending into generation. Some are assimilated to Athena according to the highest degree of excellence, but others subsist proximately after these. 1,000 years, therefore, signify this excellence, for they are the measure of a perfect genesiurgic period, on account of 1,000 being a cubic number. I believe the 1,000-year period comes up in the Phaedrus, also the 3,000-year period. But yeah, that's the time it takes for one cycle. I would have to cross-reference that, but hence this number is very properly adapted to a life superior according to generation, and which is in a greater degree assimilated to the tutelar goddess. If also you wish to transfer these things to the universe, you may there behold all the visible fabrication which is Hephaestian, and adorning causes and adorned effects, some of which are more total, but others more partial, and some being analogous to the Athenians, but others to the Satans. For nothing hinders but that the same things may be surveyed analogously in demiurgic causes, in the universe, and in a historical narration. So all the possible senses are true, including the historical one. So yes, it's just signifying that the Athenians are more in the train of Athena according to the physical Athenian demiurgic act. We had speculated before, and Proclus seemed to almost confirm that the Satans were more emulating the intellectual nature of Athena. So the Athenians being temporally prior signifies their priority in terms of the way in which they imitate the cosmic Athena. So it signifies that superiority. It signifies the the historical literal truth, and also it signifies in the cosmos that some things participate more directly of the Hephaestian generation, others less directly, and in less perfectly. The divine Iamblichus, however, doubts how the gods are said to be allotted certain places according to definite times, as for instance, Athena was first allotted to Athens and afterwards Sais. For if their allotment commences from a certain time, it will also at a certain time cease. For whatever is measured by time is a thing of this kind. Farther still, with respect to the place which they are allotted at a certain time, was it without a ruler when it fell to their lot, or was it under the dominion of other gods? Okay, so before the land where Athens is was allotted to Athena, did some other god rule it? Okay. For if indeed it was without a ruler, how is it possible that anything belonging to the universe can be perfectly destitute of divinity? Proclus says elsewhere that like everything in the cosmos has some kind of ruling principle, some kind of archon over it. How, in short, can any place remain without the guardian protection of more excellent natures? Or how, if it is sufficient to the preservation of itself, can it afterwards become the allotment of some one of the gods? But if it is under the dominion of another leader, it will also fall to the allotment of another god, and thus an absurdity will ensue. For the second god does not divulge the prefecture and allotment of the former divinity, nor do the gods alternately receive the places of each other, nor do daimons change their allotments. Iamblichus, having thus doubted, dissolves the doubts by saying that the allotments of the gods are perpetually established, but that the participants of them at one time derive advantage from the guardianship of the rulers, and at another time reap no benefit from it. So Athens and Sais were both eternally allotted to Athena, but the Athenians and Satans began to receive the providential energies of Athena at those particular times because of a shift in their own nature. You know, Proclus will say, like Christians often do as well, that God or the gods always emanate their blessings, but it's up to us to turn ourselves towards them. He adds that these are the participations which are measured by time, and which sacred institutions frequently call the birthdays of the gods. It has, however, been observed by us that this resembles that which happens about souls. For every soul has entirely a tutelar god, and certain souls choose lives adapted to other gods. Thus, therefore, every place is the allotment of a certain god, and there is a time when it becomes the allotment of some other divinity, who renders it adapted through a certain period or through certain mystic rites established by men. For allotment is twofold, the one being essential, but the other subsisting according to habitude. But let us direct our attention to what follows. Right, so the essential allotments of the gods are always associated with place perpetually, but then particular events can bring about a temporary allotment of some other divinity, including rites established by men. Next quote. But an account of the transactions of this our city during the space of 8,000 years is preserved in our sacred writings. Proclus. The priest assigns to the Athenians the number 9,000, receiving this also from history, but to the Satans the number 8,000, measuring the lives of the citizens by the chiliad, conformably to the writings in the temples. For by this number, as the philosopher Porphyry says, daimons also measure time. Interesting. So according to Porphyry, evidently daimons measure time by the number 8,000. Farther still, the priest makes this narration from the sacred writings, which manifest, as Iamblichus would say, the stable guard of the mundane divine guardians. Okay. The priest makes this narration from the sacred writings, which manifests the stable guard of the mundane divine guardians. Okay. These numbers, however, happen to lives according to a probable reason. For 8,000 is a cube on a cube, but 9,000 is a tetragonic superficies on a cube. Okay. So footnote 1 for 1,000 is a cube, and so likewise is 8. And then 2 for 9 is a square, and 1,000 is a cube. Hence, the 1 gives depth to a superficies, and this through an indefinite dyad, but the other preserves the superficies itself in similitude and perfection from the triad. So I think that's the 8,000 and 9,000 respectively. Footnote 3, 8,000 gives depth to the superficies 20, for 20 times 20 times 20 equals 8,000, and this is through the dyad because 20 equals 2 times 10. And then footnote 4, for 9,000 is the cube of 30. Okay, but is the symbol of a better life. So 9,000 is the symbol of a better life to remain in itself and to adorn secondary natures. And it is an indication of a more imperfect life to descend to secondary natures, to be assimilated to them, and to be filled with a certain indefiniteness. Since, however, even a secondary nature is not entirely deprived of similitude to divinity, the descent is through a cube in which there is a tetradic similitude. So the tetrad, the number 4, of course, is associated with the tetractys of the Pythagoreans and has divine connotations, also demiurgic connotations. 5, i.e., the descent is through 9,000, in which there is a tetradic similitude because, as Proclus had before observed, it is a square superficies on a cube. Okay, so it's a cube. It's the face of a cube. So it has a tetradic aspect. But it is better to imitate more excellent nature through a more simple life, than through a life which is more compounded, and a square is more simple than a cube. If, however, you should say that the number 9,000 is adapted to those that have their hypostasis from Earth and Vulcan, for 1,000 is terrestrial, as being a cube, but 9 pertains to Vulcan, Hephaestus, quote, with them I many artificial forms for 9 years fashioned, says Hephaestus in Homer. In thus speaking, you will not wander from the truth. Okay, so in addition to showing the Athenians' superiority to the Satans, there's also the association, especially of the Athenians, with Hephaestus. And 1,000 is a terrestrial number, and 9 pertains to Vulcan, Hephaestus, because of this quote from, I'm not sure if it's the Iliad. With them I many artificial forms for 9 years fashioned. So 9 is associated poetically. So, okay. But in short, a cube is adapted to the terrestrial allotments of Athena, since the decad is attributed to the heavens, and the last progression of the decad, 9, gives subsistence to the solid number 1,000. Okay, for the gods make their progression from the celestial allotments to the terrestrial as the last. Okay, maybe I'm wrong in saying it's 9. But in short, a cube is adapted to the terrestrial allotments of Athena, since the decad is attributed to the heavens, and the last progression of the decad gives subsistence to the solid number 1,000. Okay, so 10 is associated with the heavens, 1,000 as a cube of 10 is associated with the solid and earth, therefore. For the gods make their progression from the celestial allotments to the terrestrial as the last. This, therefore, must be said by us. The philosopher Porphyry, however, in interpreting these things, supposes Hephaestus to be the intellect that presides over art, but earth to be the lunar sphere. For this is called by the Egyptians ethereal earth. He says, therefore, that souls which derive their subsistence from divinity, but participate of the artificial, or Hephaestian, intellect, are disseminated in the body of the moon, souls that give themselves to the arts dwelling there, and that they have bodies which are reflections of the ethereal bodies. That 9,000 years also are adapted to these souls after the following manner. So he just gives Porphyry's interpretation. Right, souls come from various heavenly bodies as they descend, and souls which derive their subsistence from divinity but participate of the Hephaestian intellect are disseminated in the body of the moon. So Hephaestus is associated with the moon, at least by Porphyry here, and the souls that give themselves to the arts dwell from the moon, and they have bodies which are reflections of the ethereal bodies. Okay, so that's what Porphyry says. That 9,000 years also are adapted to these souls after the following manner. A myriad of years, 10,000, is, says he, the period of the soul, which ascends and descends through the 5 stars, in order that each may have 2 chiliads, yet not successive. And I think we just saw this term chiliad, but let's chiliad, look that up again. A group of 1,000 things. So 2 chiliads not yet not successive. Okay. Time indeed is successive according to conception, for it is not without continuity. Hence all the stars have 9 lives, which is obscurely signified through 9,000 years. 9th also are performed to the dead. or rather ninths, also are performed to the dead. And in a similar manner, some give names to those that are born in the ninth year, employing as symbols the periods of generation and production. The priests, however, or rather the priest, singular, does not now assume a myriad of years, but the number of 9,000, in order that those of whom he is speaking may still be terrestrial, but approximating to the period of a myriad of years. All this interpretation, however, the divine Iamblichus rejects, and says that the discussion here is not about lives, but about the different measures of Athenian participation, emorwoll participation. It is absurd, therefore, to make mention of the periods spoken of in the Phaedrus. But if it be requisite to narrate what follows from the conception of Porphyry, it must be said that the soul lives indeed intellectually and according to Kronos on high. Okay. So is he apologizing for Porphyry in the face of Iamblichus's objection? Maybe he's like steel-manning Porphyry and then ultimately sides with Iamblichus. Generally, Proclus would side with Iamblichus. But if it be requisite to narrate what follows from the conception of Porphyry, it must be said that the soul lives indeed intellectually and according to Kronos on high, but descends first to the conception of a political life, which is Zeusian. Afterwards, she excites anger and lives ambitiously, but anger is, according to Ares. In the last place, she proceeds in her descent to desire and venereal lives, and at last exerts physical reasons or productive powers. But all reasons are Hermaic, and Hermes is the inspective guardian of physical reasons. Okay, so I guess we skipped over maybe Venus, Aphrodite was the venereal lives, and then last, souls exert physical reasons. So souls begin in their first perfect birth, which all souls share, according to Timaeus, intellectually, according to Kronos, and then the political life, and then the ambitious life, and then the venereal, and then to exert physical reasons or productive powers. But all reasons are Hermaic, and Hermes is the inspective guardian of physical reasons. So before it was said that Hephaestus creates the spermaticos logos, the reason principles of nature, but the physical reason principles have an inspective guardian also, which is Hermes. So both Hephaestus and Hermes are associated with the reason principles of nature. All right. Through these, however, she is bound to body. The soul is bound to body through exerting physical reason principles. Okay, so these various stages then seem to occur before embodiment. Through these, however, she is bound to body, the reason principles. And again, receiving a body, she first lives. Okay, yeah, so all of these various stages of the soul's life were all incorporeal. So there are various phases of incorporeal existence for souls. And then once the soul becomes embodied, she first lives physically, being the supplier of nutriment and increase to the body. Afterwards, she lives epithemetically, exciting genesiurgic powers. So according to those physical reason principles that got her incarnated, and then according to appetite and generation. In the next place, she lives under the influence of anger, rising against her former habits, but entering into an ambitious life. So it's like the descent and then ascent according to the same steps, right? Under the influence of anger, so that ambitious life according to Ares, rising against her former habits, entering into an ambitious life. Afterwards, she lives politically, according to Zeus, moderating the passions. And in the last place, she lives intellectually. If, therefore, she is restored to her pristine state, her life is intellectual, and the myriad is terminated. So that was 5 stars that we go down through, and then us, and those 5 stars, of course, are the, we're dealing with, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus. And then I don't know what the physical reason would be. That should be associated with the star as well. Maybe the moon. But I don't know if the moon would count as a star. Okay. Through these, however, she is bound to body. And, oh wait, we already read that. In the last place, she lives intellectually. The myriad is terminated. So that's 10 steps overall, 5 down, 5 up. But in generation, though she is conversant with it in the best manner, she lives according to a deficiency by the Chiliad. And of this, the number 9,000 is a symbol being adapted to the best polity of the Athenians. Okay. Deficiency by the Chiliad, the number 1,000. And of this, the number 9,000 is a symbol being adapted to the best polity of the Athenians. That I don't quite get why 9,000 is a symbol. Maybe like 9,000 plus that 1,000 gets you to the myriad, which is more symbolic of the heavenly. So I'm not going to worry too much about that particular. We will just keep going. Next quote. And let's see. All right, looking good. I will therefore briefly unfold to you the laws and the most beautiful of the deeds of those citizens that existed 9,000 years ago. For when we are more at leisure, we shall accurately discuss every particular, receiving for this purpose the sacred writings themselves. Proclus. If you wish to refer what is here said to the whole order of things, the number 9,000 will manifest the total progression as far as to a cube, and terrestrial works, and likewise the life which pervades through all things. But through the word briefly, the union of many productive powers and the compression of them according to intellect are indicated. For the synoptical is an image of intellectual impartibility, but that which departs into multitude of prolific powers, multiplying, producing, and dividing forms into minute parts through diversity. The laws are images of the divided fabrication, which is united according to intellect. But the most beautiful work is an adumbration of the orderly distribution of things, which is extended to one beautiful end. For beauty subsisting according to the united proceeds from intelligibles to the visible fabrication. Right? The resumption of the sacred writings indicates the recurrence to the paradigms of them, from which also the priest, being filled, delivers these things to Solon. The narration, therefore, will be concerning the divided and multiplied fabrication, which is connected by intellect, and extends as far as to terrestrial works, as may be inferred from all that has been said. And I think that was actually fairly direct, so we'll keep going. In the first place, consider the laws of these people, and compare them with ours. For you will now find here many paradigms of things which then subsisted in your city. Proclus. As Socrates summarily discussed his own polity, thus also the priest briefly discusses the laws of the ancient Athenians, in order that the latter may have diminution with reference to the former, and also a similitude to it. Okay, so the latter, the laws of the ancient Athenians, may have a diminution with reference to the former, Socrates' polity. So I guess, like, by Proclus here, he's saying that the ancient Athens doesn't quite live up to the ideal city. It's diminished, but it does have a similitude to it. So they're not totally equivocated. Critias remarks that it sounded exactly the same, the constitution of ancient Athens and Socrates' republic. Proclus here is saying that the ancient Athens isn't precisely the same, and that the ideal polity, of course, is greater than just ancient Athens as it happened to be. And this, very properly, that is, the one should be lesser but also similar to its archetype. For the one is more universal and the other more partial. The ideal city more universal, ancient Athens more partial. And the one is the work of dianoia, but the other of the fantasy. Right, the ideal polity was discussed according to dianoetic discursive reason, but the other, I guess, if it was a fable, then it would be according to the fantasy. But I guess maybe the fact that it had historical existence, it's referred to the fantasy because it involves the imaging faculty. But okay. This diminution indeed may be surveyed so far as Socrates had described a polity, but the priest laws. Right, so the laws are lesser than the total description of the polity. And maybe the fantasy is in the manner in which the priest is depicting ancient Athens. That would make sense. A polity, however, is the union and common bond of the life of citizens. But legislation is order proceeding into multitude and division. And the former is more analogous to the providential cause, but the latter to fate. And providence is superior to fate. But there is a similitude between Socrates and the priest, so far as both assert that they deliver the multitude of their words contractedly. Again, therefore, these things embrace wholes and divine causes, for the middle is suspended from the first fabrication and is assimilated to it. And each indeed pertains to the universe, but the latter, according to union, and one sameness, and the former according to progression and the difference of the things fabricated. Just as the third fabrication subsists according to conversion. The footnote 2 says the nature of these three fabrications is unfolded further on. Great, so we're dealing with three fabrications now to keep track of. All right, just as the third fabrication subsists according to conversion. And the first fabrication connects the war in generation celestially, but the second subordinately and according to diminution, just as the third connects the extremities of the universe. Okay, so we're just getting the beginning of this now. We have the first fabrication, which connects the war in generation celestially. So it manifests that the conflict of opposites into the celestial opposition between the circle of the same and the circle of the other, I guess. The second, subordinately and according to diminution. So I guess the second creates the sublunar realm, perhaps. And then the third connects the extremities of the universe. So the third is a joining principle between the first and second fabrication, I guess. We'll see. Very properly, therefore, does Socrates summarily deliver the laws and the whole life of the Athenians in the same manner as the priest. And these things may be assumed from what the priest now says, but he calls images paradigms because the Satans participate secondarily of those things, of which the Athenians participate primarily. For though archetypes rank among the first of beings, yet images have the first order with reference to our knowledge. As therefore things secondary by nature are said to be first, thus also they are said to be paradigms to the things they are elevated, to the things that are elevated from them, and which know through them the natures prior to them. So he's explaining why the priest says that his own constitution contains paradigms of what the ancient Athenians held, where by its temporal priority and closer likeness to the goddess, you would expect the ancient Athens to contain the paradigms. Well, the priest has superior knowledge because of the way that epistemically the soul ascends to what it previously descended from in reverse order. So, for instance, when Simplicius talks about Aristotle's categories, or the way he talks about primary and secondary substances, that's because Aristotle says that primary substances are the composite material, secondary substances are the genre of being, which properly are first, but he calls them secondary because we're dealing with an epistemological work, the categories, and what is primary epistemologically are the concrete sensibles, and so it makes sense to deal with them first. And so here the priest has a preeminence in terms of knowledge because the priest is representing this secondary image of the perfect constitution, Sais, as opposed to Athens. And so we say that Sais has the paradigms because we see Sais more clearly because it's closer in the descent. Just extrapolating and trying to make sense of this. But it's a consistently used trope, I guess, to say that something is primary according to the state of our knowledge, even if it's secondary according to the ontological hierarchy. Here also, what pertains to the Athenians indicates a more total, but what pertains to the Satans, a more partial order. These things likewise are analogous, both in partial natures and in wholes, so that the polity which is about to be delivered pertains to the city of the Athenians, or rather to the whole orderly distribution of things, and the laws extend to the whole world from Athena. For every law is said to be the distribution of intellect, and is rightly said to be so. But the laws of the Athenians, being established conformably to the tutelar goddess, exhibit the distribution of the Athenian intellect. But of this kind are the laws in the universe, which are defined conformably to one demiurgic intellect, and the one providence of Athena. Okay, so before Athena was... There's like an intellectual Athena and cosmic Athena. Athena is associated with the mundane fabrication with her veil, but also she brings the intellectual nature to the universe in enforcing the laws of the universe, or, introducing the laws of the universe. Hephaestus was also said to be responsible for the reason principles of nature. So whether the laws in the universe are different from the reason principles of nature, I am not sure. If they're one and the same, then the laws of the universe, that is the reason principles of nature, are associated with Athena, Hephaestus, and also Hermes. Athena insofar as they're intellective, Hephaestus insofar as they're generative, and Hermes as an inspective guardian of the laws, I guess ensuring that these laws coordinate the different hypostases conformably to nature. Okay, let's move on. And I don't want to go too much longer than an hour, so we have like 10 minutes. Okay, next quote. For the race of the priests was separated from the rest of the inhabitants. So the guardians were set apart. That in a certain respect, all this order of the polity of the priest is more partial and more divided than that of Socrates, imitating the middle fabrication, may be learnt from the multitude and quality of the genre in the city. Okay, so the priest is now reporting the laws of Sais, and that represents the middle fabrication, not the first fabrication. For in the polity of Socrates, there were three genera, the guardian, the auxiliary, and the mercenary, for the triad is allied to the demiurgic monad. But here there are the double of these, the sacerdotal and the military, the demiurgic or pertaining to artificers, and the pastoral, the venatic, and the agricultural. I don't know what venatic means. Venatic. Oh, relating to hunting. Okay. For the middle fabrication has at one and the same time the dyadic and the triadic, and both these numbers are adapted to Minerva. Okay, so the principal fabrication was the celestial, and that's associated with the triad. So perhaps the demiurgic triad, Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, is associated with the first fabrication, and then another set of divinities is associated with the second, perhaps. But the second fabrication has both dyadic and triadic aspects, which gives the six-fold division of caste in the constitution of Sais here, which stands for the second fabrication, Proclus says. Proclus still hasn't explained the three fabrications, which is kind of problematic, but one of these, indeed, viz. The triad, is immediately adapted to the goddess. Let me read this again. For the middle fabrication has one and the same time the dyadic and the triadic, and both these numbers are adapted to Athena. So both 2 and 3 are adapted to Athena. But one of these, indeed, viz. The triad, is immediately adapted to the goddess, but the other according to generation. For the hexad is a triangle from the triad. Footnote 1, for 6 is a triangular number and is the double of 3. Okay. By the trigonic, therefore, and by the hexad from the triad, the diminution and at the same time alliance to the goddess are manifested. So 2 and 3 are associated with Athena, 3 principally, 2 according to generation. The hexad reveals that combination of the triad and dyad, revealing the association with Athena, but also revealing that diminution vis-a-vis the more principal participation enjoyed by Athens or any other hypothetical more perfect participant in the eternal constitution. That is the natural law at the same time, the cosmic order. For though every fabrication participates of Minerva, Athena, yet the first, so all three participate of Athena, yet the first and supreme parts of the universe, and the first fabrication, and the first father are filled from her in a more abundant degree. Thus, therefore, if you alone select these genera, you will find the number adapted to the goddess. But if you add the presiding over wisdom, you will entirely find the heptad, which is of a Minerval characteristic, Athenian characteristic. The heptad is 7, right? Yeah, 7. I should definitely know that, not have to look it up, but all right. Presiding over wisdom. So, all right. And this is one of the things that are of great notoriety. So if we add one more, presiding over wisdom, which is not mentioned in the text right here, you'll find this number 7, which also has associations with Athena. So far we have 2, 3, 6, and 7 all having associations with Athena. And this is one of the things that are of great notoriety. The feminine nature, likewise, of 7 is celebrated, and that it is produced from the monad alone, because it's prime. Okay, so I see like the virgin birth of Athena is like the number 7, which is prime. The monad also, the triad, and the heptad are said to be especially images of Athena, the first indeed as being intellectual, the monad, the second, the triad, as converting the monad to itself, and the third as proceeding from the Father alone. After this manner, therefore, you may infer from their numbers, or infer from numbers, period. It is necessary, however, from the quality of the genre to survey the diminution and transcendency of these, for the sacerdotal is subordinate to the guardian genus, which ascends as far as to the first cause. Footnote 2, Plato asserts this of the guardians in his Republic. that the Guardians, or the summon of the Guardians, will actually like make contact with the forms and all the way up to the form of the good. For Plato himself in the Republic arranges the priests under the politician and does not impart to them political power. So sacerdotal authority is subordinate to the true statesman, who is the philosopher, of course, for Plato. All right. The military also is subordinate to the auxiliary genus, for the latter arranges in a becoming manner and sufficiently disciplines the inhabitants of the city. But the former pursues war alone and things pertaining to it, and participates of this study alone. So the Guardians are looking up to the paradigms, the auxiliaries are looking to the city, and then just the ordinary military is more outward facing, so you can see how they're subordinate. You know, like when we look to ourselves and our inner nature, that's a superior energy to when we look to our bodies, which is superior to when we look to our belongings, right? But the former pursues war alone and things pertaining to it, and participates of this study alone. And the mercenary tribe is divided into the remaining genre. The polity of Socrates, therefore, surpasses that of the priest as being more comprehensive and after a manner co-adapted to the genre prior to it, so that both from number and quality it becomes evident to us that the polity second there's a sentence fragment. So that from both number and quality, it becomes evident to us that the polity second after it. There's a problem in the text here. The page numbers are correct. All right, we'll just have to keep going. We establish, however, the analogies of the polity of Socrates to the universe to be as follows. The genus of guardians we arrange as analogous to the celestial gods, the auxiliary genus to the more excellent natures, the attendants on the celestial gods and the defenders of the universe, and the mercenary genus to those powers that connect a material nature with partial souls. The first of these also is analogous to the fixed stars, that's the guardians again, the second auxiliaries to the planets, and the third to material natures. We may likewise assume in the celestial gods themselves all these according to analogy. Okay, so of course all things are in each according to, or rather all things are in all according to each. So this same hierarchy should be manifested in the celestial gods alone. But those celestial gods that correspond to the mercenary genus won't connect a material nature with partial souls. It'll rather like contain the seeds of such a connection immaterially, we might say. Okay, here, however, it is worthwhile to survey how and after what manner these genera enumerated by the priest are to be assumed in the universe. For the philosophy Porphyry arranges them as follows: that the priests are analogous to the archangels in the heavens, who are converted to the gods, of whom they are the messengers. But the soldiers are analogous to souls descending into bodies. Again, the shepherds are analogous to the powers that are arranged over the herds of animals, which in arcane narrations are said to be souls that are frustrated of the human intellect, but have a propensity towards animals. So the powers that are arranged over herds of animals are said to be souls that are frustrated of the human intellect, but have a propensity towards animals. So it seems to indicate then that herds of animals have a collective soul, but I don't know what frustrated of the human intellect means. I guess these souls of herds are higher than souls of individual animals, but that's the most direct evidence I've seen of like collective souls so far in Neoplatonism. The idea has definitely been brought up, but never with the term souls used in this way. For there is also a certain curator of the herd of men, and there are likewise certain partial curators, some being the inspectors of nations, others of cities, and others of individuals. But the hunters are analogous to those powers that hunt after souls and enclose them in bodies. There are likewise powers who delight in the hunting of animals, such as Diana, Artemis is said to be, and another multitude, together with her, of venetic daimons, hunting daimons. And the husbandmen are analogous to those powers that preside over fruits. All this administration, therefore, of sublunary daimons is said by Plato to receive many demiurgic distributions in consequence of looking to the effect which now is, or is becoming to be. The divine Iamblichus, however, represents these, or rather reprehends these assertions as neither Platonic nor true. Once again, Iamblichus arguing against his former teacher Porphyry. For archangels are not anywhere mentioned by Plato, nor does the military genus pertain to souls verging to bodies. Okay, this is just historical detail. It's kind of important. Porphyry, according to Proclus here, mentions archangels. I've kind of wondered, when did Neoplatonists begin talking about the order of angels as opposed to daimons? Plato always uses the term daimon and seems to incorporate all the different Neoplatonic levels, daimons, heroes, and angels under that. Although I guess Plato does mention heroes, but not in the same sense that Neoplatonists do, seemingly. But all right. Porphyry apparently mentions the archangels as a class of souls. For archangels are not anywhere mentioned by Plato, nor does the military genus pertain to souls verging to bodies, for it is not proper to oppose these to gods or daimons. For we should act absurdly in arranging these in the middle genus, but gods and daimons, among the last artificers. Nor must it be admitted. Right. So gods and daimons are responsible for things lower down than the embodiment of souls. So then we shouldn't think that what is represented by the military genus is going to be inferior to those gods and daimons. I mean, I guess the idea is that it's a bad thing to go around hunting to bring souls down into bodies. That's like corporeally invested daimons do that in Neoplatonism, and they're pretty low on the wrong. Actually, I don't quite understand what's being said. Let's just read this again. For archangels are not anywhere mentioned, nor does the military genus pertain to souls verging to bodies, for it is not proper to oppose these to gods or daimons. Souls verging to bodies, for we should act absurdly in arranging these in the middle genus, but gods and daimons among the last artificers. Okay, so if these are souls that themselves verge to bodies, I thought before it was mentioned that the military genus was were effectively daimons or higher souls that bring partial souls to bodies. But here, okay, maybe the relevant term is pertain to souls verging to bodies. So maybe you can still preserve the previous reading. These higher souls pertain to souls that verge to bodies. I do think the objection is that there are gods and daimons among the last artificers that are responsible for mundane corporeal things that shouldn't be inferior to what is responsible for souls incarnating in bodies, which is itself not as good a thing, perhaps. So anyway, they shouldn't be in the middle. Gods and daimons shouldn't be below the force that is responsible for basically sin. Nor must it be admitted that those are shepherds who are frustrated of human intellect, but have a certain sympathy to animals. For the existence of daimons who govern the mortal nature is not derived from men, nor are those powers hunters who enclose the soul in body, as in a net, since the soul is not thus conjoined to which it is now delivered, is subordinate to that of Socrates. Okay. Since the soul is not thus conjoined to which is now delivered, is subordinate to that of Socrates, and will rank as the something to the body. Again, this text is like getting a little mutilated. Okay. I think we get the gist. We're going to keep going. Nor is this mode of theory philosophic, but full of barbaric arrogance. Footnote 1, it is somewhat singular that Porphyry, who called the Christian religion barbaros, or whatever, a barbarously bold wickedness, should have adopted this theory. Okay. Nor are husbandmen to be referred to Ceres, for the gods are exempt from the proximate causes of nature. Reprehending, therefore, these assertions, Iamblichus does not like these assertions by Porphyry. He, Iamblichus, considers the priest as analogous through similitude to all such secondary essences and powers as honor and worship the causes prior to themselves, but the shepherds as analogous to all those mundane powers that are allotted the government of the life which verges to body. And of the most irrational powers, and who distribute these in an orderly manner. The hunters he places as analogous to those universal powers who adorn secondary natures through the investigation of real being, but the husbandmen as corresponding to the powers that give efficacy to the seeds that descend from the heavens to the earth, and the soldiers to the powers that subvert everything atheistical and corroborate that which is divine. After this manner, therefore, the divine Iamblichus interprets what is said by the priest. But it is common to both these philosophers that they divide the fabricative genus into the pastoral, the venatic, and the agricultural, but they do not produce the four genera from one. For no one who rightly considers the affair can place either the pastoral or the venetic under the fabricative genus. Okay, we are just going to keep going here. It's not super clear, all the points that are being made. I've been trying to be, thorough, but also, this is a lot of detail on what does not seem to have a lot of importance to me right now. If it turns out that that's wrong, and we really need to understand this division that Iamblichus and Porphyry are arguing about of the types of souls corresponding to the types of occupations in Sais, then we'll come back to it. So, moving on. Will it not, therefore, be better to interpret the passage conformably to our preceptor, Iamblichus and Syrianus, who follows Iamblichus? Syrianus is our preceptor here, probably. By admitting that the sacerdotal and military tribes form one dyad, but the fabricative and agricultural another, and the pastoral and venatic a third dyad, and assuming an order of this kind to investigate the paradigms of them. For the sacerdotal genus subsists in the anagogic gods, the military in the guardian gods, and the fabricative in the gods who separate all the forms, and the productive principles of mundane natures. But the agricultural genus subsists in those gods that supernally excite nature and disseminate souls about generation. For Plato likewise denominates the lapse of the soul into generation a dissemination, just like farmers sow their seeds. But to sow is most adapted to the husbandman, as is also to collect productions of nature. The pastoral genus subsists in the gods that govern distinctly all the forms of life that revolve in generation, for Plato in the Republic delivers to us certain divine shepherds, and the venatic hunting class subsists in the divinities that give an orderly distribution to all material spirits, for it is usual with theologists to call these gods hunters. All these genera likewise pertain to the middle fabrication, viz. The convertive genus. The guardian, that which administers the psychical allotments, that which governs the genesiurgic forms of life, everything which fabricates and gives form to material natures, and that which arranges the last order of spirits. So these are the things that are accomplished by the middle fabrication, which was said to be inferior to, of course, the first fabrication, which was seemingly pertaining to the celestial. So all these genera pertain to the middle fabrication. We're going to read this again to try to remember what the middle fabrication is. So that has to do with the convertive genus, the guardian, that which administers the psychical allotments, that which governs the genesiurgic forms of life, everything which fabricates and gives form to material natures, and that which arranges the last order of spirits. That, however, which pays attention to wisdom, the kind of seventh class that's not mentioned, but Proclus brings it up, and that which is contemplative must be considered as different from all these genera, and which the Egyptian also celebrates above all the rest, making mention in the first place, as being a priest, of the sacerdotal genus. All the genera, therefore, are 7, and the monad is exempt from the hexad. So that one, the 7th, is not mentioned, and it's left from the 6, which are inferior. And the monad, indeed, is analogous to the one intellect which connects all the fabrication of generated natures, but the hexad is analogous to the more partial orders under this intellect, viz., to the anagogic, guardian, formalizing, and vivifying orders, and also to those that are the leaders of the herds of a tame life, and to those that rule over the brutal nature, which orders in the universe likewise are separated from the fixed stars. Moreover, he says that these orders may be seen among men, that is, Syrianus says, these orders may be seen among men in the first place among the Athenians, but in the second place among the Satans, according to the division of genre, each accomplishing its proper work in a definite manner. For he manifests this by saying, separate from others, in order that we may understand the unmingled purity of the genre, proceeding supernally through diminution as far as to the last of things. Okay, so this one was seemingly more particular. I mean, we could try to take all of these orders consistently and diagram them and understand them. We're just going to let some of this stuff kind of wash over us, get what we can out of it while we go through it. The more obviously universally applicable sections, we will stop and closely examine, like we have some of these other sections. This one was mostly just a lot of ingenious interpretive moves by Proclus and by these other Neoplatonists that he's reporting. So still interesting stuff as always. We'll pick up here next time.